So we are at the top, our little reading nook. I think this is where I would hang out if we ended up living here someday. This is like Belle's hideout, I feel like. We keep calling this the Beauty and the Beast room, but it feels like that.
All right, so you first walk in the house. What was the room that you wanted to run to the most?
I think I stood in the foyer for a very long time. It was just kind of like, it was awestruck, it was everywhere. All right, so right now we are in the hallway off of the garage that leads to the foyer. I have recruited some help. It's been a little overwhelming. Taking off the fabric on the walls and getting these walls prepared for paint was my job. It's something I could contribute to the project, but so much. Every wall was covered and my mom was helping with the beginning of the project and it was too much for her. So every wall in this house had this bat, so it's cushion, and then fabric. And this room in particular actually had 2 layers of fabric on it. I have recruited some help and we've been kind of cruising this last week. It's been great. We're really making moves and strides and getting these walls ready to go. So the foyer still needs to be peeled. I'm just kind of pretending that it's not here right now, to be perfectly honest. I have to get all of these panels off, the light fixtures, and then this. Our drywaller is offered to help when he gets scaffolding up and he has stilts and all of that. So once that's up, then I can kind of work. So right now we're just kind of working on what we can reach. We'll move up from there.
This was a product of many hours work from our carpenters. Kind of no way to know what you're doing until you start peeling stuff off. We had the treads purchased, we had the railing purchased, and you had the idea of what it was supposed to be and how it was supposed to go. It never matters until you start ripping treads off and seeing how it worked. We ripped off all the treads that the carpets were on, kind of found that we had to finagle these new ones in. Before that, we took the old stair rail that had the tufted velvet on it, and we glued this bendable railing up. So you essentially comes in strips, and we layer it with glue, and then custom bend it with about 1,000 clamps to the old stair rail and let it sit for a couple days to get this original kind of curve to it. So once we had this done, we had the stair treads in, which we had to put in piece by piece, cut out customly. We used the old treads as a template to kind of make these ones fit exactly. We had about 12 to 15 of these pieces of poplar that we had to bend again to make it something for these spindles to put in. We spent about 6 months looking for spindles. The railing would have had to been massive like it was previously. We wanted to go more thin. So with these spindles, we tried to match the original spindles. You can see the gold, it has this feather and ball design. So we really attempted to get very close to this, and this is stamped iron. So these are solid iron railings. They have been coated with like an oil so that they don't rust, but it has the same design. It kind of matches the gold leaf down here with the feathers along the bottom of the stringer. We wanted these to be a little bit more elegant and a little less bulky, while also fitting code because there was a much too big of a gap between those spindles and it would not have passed. We're also really happy about the chandelier finally kind of coming back to life. There was a weird process in the middle of the renovation that half of it stopped working. We really didn't want to replace it. It's a very nice chandelier. It's very grand. It fits the space very well. About a month ago, our electricians finally climbed up in the attic and found a frayed wire that they completely had to redo, and then chandelier turned back on.
So we battled back and forth what to do with this front door. It's an incredible piece, but it was in such bad shape that we didn't know if we could save it. We actually even looked at new doors and priced them out. We didn't like anything more than we love this one. It's extremely French, it's extremely old looking, but again, there was cracks everywhere. The wood was in terrible shape, so our carpenter took it off the hinges and it looked like a surgical table in this foyer for a couple of weeks. They're just completely smooth now, and we chose a new color for them. Corey painstakingly searched for the perfect hardware. That's all here now, and we love them. So glad that we did not buy a new set of doors and we were able to reuse these.
So there were a couple of reasons we had to go with certain things. I wanted brass. This is all solid brass, but it had to have a plate on both sides because this didn't have a traditional method of locking. So if you actually came to the house previously before we remodeled the door, you couldn't get in. Latched in here, so there was no way to actually unlock the door from the outside. So if this door was locked, there's no way anyone else would get in. We had to remove all of that hardware and kind of mortise out new handles. In order to do that, we were able to kind of cover up some of the areas that really were basically more wood fill than they were wood. So yeah, the plate on the outside and on the inside, and then solid brass. So that kind of matches some of the handles in the house, in the kitchen, in the butler's pantry, and I think it just looks good on the color we chose for the door.
So this was probably the last room we actually finished taking the fabric off. So whenever we were taking people through here and we were describing the fabric, it was like, oh, actually it's right here still. You can still see there's fluff on some of the walls right now. Yeah, it was a lot. You'd come into this space, and I think that's why we approached this at like this huge grand remodel of this space, because it was so heavy and so overwhelming. But once we got the fabric off the walls, we appreciated a lot that was here. So that's why we were able to strip back what we planned to do here instead of taking it all out. We're like, wait a minute, once all of that's gone, I mean, these floors are absolutely beautiful and there's gold leaf on the walls and we can see it now. You're not so overwhelmed and distracted by all of the fabric. So in this room, we're in the half bath on the first floor off the foyer, and we revealed this wallpaper underneath the fabric, just like everywhere else in the whole house. And we kind of fell in love with this wallpaper. It's so cool. It's kind of got a metallic finish and then almost like a velvet pattern on top of it. Honestly, this has been like the last room that we've touched. We're kind of finishing up in a lot of the other spaces, but I haven't given up on trying to figure out how to save this, and I don't know that we can. So we're trying to debate if we're gonna recover it with a different wallpaper equally as cool, or I kind of want to picture frame out an area so that part of it shows or something. I don't know. I haven't given up yet. A lot of the things that we took out of this house, if it had a lot of character, we wanted to find a reason to repurpose them. So this vanity, the vanity top was really pretty and we really loved it in this space. It's unique, and we felt like in a half bath especially, we could go a little crazy. So we ended up reusing the vanity top, didn't like the cabinet underneath. So we actually ended up reusing the spindles from the foyer to be the base of it, to be a very like unique feature. So we removed the old carpet that was in here, and pretty sure it was original carpet to the home. And we put black and white checkered marble and a diamond pattern in here. So very elegant, very historic. Okay, so we are in the laundry room mudroom right off the garages right now. Yes, it looks like a disaster, but surprisingly, like, we're making strides in here. But this has really been the disaster area, because this is where painters empty their brushes and all of the supplies are still in here. But at the same time, we're still moving in this room. The flooring has already been switched out. This is a black and white small check, so it's not quite the same as other spaces in the room, but again, a little bit cohesive. It had the sticky linoleum tile in here, so that was easy to rip out. All the cabinetry has been painted. It's the same color as the kitchen. Tan, beige, gray, very neutral, just to make things kind of clean and done in here. So one thing we also removed in here, next to the kind of slop sink, there was a toilet in the corner right by the windows. Didn't make sense because it's in the laundry room and it's next to the half bath. So it was just kind of a random toilet in a room, and we definitely took that out. My favorite room in the house is probably the library with the spiral staircase, and we purchased it with the full library collection, which we had appraised and had looked at, and I guess overall it would have been decent money, but I couldn't let them go. So we now have a library collection at home. I love sitting in that room at home and seeing these antique and collected over the years, whether it was Mr. Auker or other owners of this house.
In the next few years, we do want to build a house, and I do have a very formal front room that I want in there full of books. They are very, very cool.
They look beautiful right now.
They do, yeah. There's a lot of mixed in books that you did sort through pretty well that you didn't want to keep, but there's so many.
This is my favorite room.
Tell me about the staircase to nowhere.
Okay, so what we're doing with it, rather than it going into the bedroom up in that area, it's gonna just go up to a landing with more bookshelves. We have discussed putting a secret door in the bookshelf into the ballroom.
And we're back and forth on that.
It's basically one of those things at the end of this project, like how much energy do we have or not. It's gonna have a spot for a little chair and reading nook at the top of the staircase.
That whole wall needs to be rebuilt though. It's very, very wonky. If you look at it down the side, it waves out. So we have to completely tear that whole wall down and rebuild it up and put new paneling in. So maybe when we're doing that, we can
do something cool
throw
with
a
the
secret bookshelf in there. We are in the library now. Behind me is kind of one of our toughest things that we had to do. This was all glass sliders, triple pane glass sliders. This previously was the back end of the house, so this went to outside. The issue with it was this wall above me was kicked out and bowing, and this whole floor down here was sinking. Way, 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 way too much weight on this wall, and it wasn't properly secured, so it was both coming like this and it was sinking at the same time. So what we had to do was take out all of the sliders. We had to take all the sliders out because the spans were too big in between them. We couldn't span 9 feet with this amount of floor. What we did instead was put a full 2x8 wall. So we had this wall here, which is double height, and then we had the garden room wall over here. They were two separate loads, floor load, and then this goes all the way up to a roof load and a floor load. So we were originally going to go with a 2x6. We went with a 2x8 to take both of those loads. And we put that load, transferred it down to a double bottom plate to disperse the weight on the block wall. Not only did we fix the twisting and bending, but we also fixed the sinking and the pressure and the compression of it. We also sheathed the outside like an exterior wall because that adds shear strength. So this wall is now indestructible, but we did lose the windows. We'll hopefully gain some bookshelves. It's at least not going to fall over anymore. I can't remember if it was when we first walked through the house or if it was when we already bought it that we saw this wall kind of kick out, but it was a situation that we kind of just put away in the back of our head and knew that we had to deal with it. We had no idea how in depth it was, and we didn't know until literally this was being replaced and we had a temporary wall up and we pulled stuff off that we realized how bad it was. We kind of knew we had to do something with it. We just didn't know the extent. Kind of like everything in this house, we knew something had to be done, and then as we open it up further, we didn't realize how much had to be done. But this is now rock solid. I'm really glad we did it. We'll try our best to match this room as well to make it a complete library and kind of make it a feature instead of fixing an issue. Hopefully makes it look like we actually intended to do it instead of trying to make it work. So this is the other side of the library wall I was just talking about. So I do think I like the library more with it closed off and more bookshelves, but this is kind of unfortunate here that we have to have this. It won't stay like this. We're thinking of a green wall or some sort of garden wall to kind of tie into this space, but we had to add the wall in. We had to add this shear strength, and this is the point that was compressing a lot. It was pushing all of this weight down. So we reshored that up. We got new blocks and new beams all underneath it so that the load is dispersed now over the blocking. Super strong, which I feel is arguably more important than the aesthetic of the glass. So we're going to try to do something cool and interesting with this. We just haven't figured out and nailed it down yet.
All right, we're 12 months in. We are in the library right now. We're talking about the solution we came up with when we had the horrible crooked wall. Engineer came in, they shored up everything, fixed everything. However, that load could not sit on those sliders. That wasn't an option. So we put a wall here, and then we kept tossing around like what design element is gonna go with that, right? It can't just be a blank wall in this absolute splendid room. Like what do we do with that? It gets a little funky behind the steps, and we were kind of worried about this area. Now that it's in and we see it, it just feels really cohesive and beautiful. So we went with red oak. It still needs the trim pieces to kind of finish it out, but we are keeping the stain in this room. So our next project here is to work with the red oak to match the whitewash that's on this room, originally from the 1970s. So it's gonna be a little bit of a challenge. We're gonna get as close as that we can to that original stain and have this match with the rest of the bookshelves. So we are in the library. This is the spiral staircase that previously went up to that primary suite, almost like a secret exit. It wasn't working with our flow of the situation. So what we created instead is kind of like a little reading nook up there. It's the staircase to nowhere. However, when it's finished, there'll be a little bookshelf up there, and it's just a little spot for reading. We chose to close off this wall not only to make it a cute little reading nook. There's a lot of reasons structurally that we had to make that decision. We talked about downstairs how we had to make the bookshelves in here because of the wall sinking. This kind of correlated with that, along with the roof trusses. There was all kinds of issues with this previously being the old end of the house and additions in the 80s, and the way that that all came together or didn't come together between the engineer and our contractors and having to piece things back together. This kind of just made the most sense to close that off because of the way that things weren't fitting together. So now we have a cute little reading nook.
In the library now, 15 or so months in, we have, I think, a fully finished library. I have to do some cleaning and refinishing on the floors, but to the right of me, we have a fully functional working fireplace now that's all been remodeled. Previously, it was like a travertine. The hearth was cracked. This upper header piece was cracked. This leg was cracked. So we had marble slabs made, and tile guy put these in. Chelsie spray painted the actual cover with heat-proof spray paint to kind of make it go away a little bit more. It was pink and beige and black from being charred. It was all different types of colors. Didn't look great. We've got that finished, and we've also got this wall fully finished now. This was another labor of love. Behind you is the original bookshelves. These are the matching ones that are brand new. These were all custom made to match the lines in the paneling above and custom stained to look like the old ones. The reason we had to do this, although it does look awesome, I actually prefer it this way, is that it was the previous back of the house. So it had glass panels in it all the way around and some sliders. As we got into it, the whole entire wall was sinking, it was racking, it was doing all kinds of stuff that we're not gonna want anyone to have to live with. We found out that the two floors and the two additions were floating completely independently of each other. So we had to put in a giant 2x8 wall with about 55 studs to shore up this whole house, tie everything together. So we lost our big pretty windows into the garden room. We couldn't put drywall back. We couldn't put something that was lesser than what this room was. Instead, we decided to go with bookshelves. And to do that, I thought the only way, we talked about painting them, we talked about sort of cheaper options, and it wasn't gonna work. We had to bite the bullet and go with the best that we could do. Our carpenters pulled off this incredible bookshelf. They have no idea that this was never here. Kind of the whole idea is to make it feel like an even bigger library in case you have just millions of books. It was a lot of matching moldings. We went to lumber companies and matched profiles so that all the profiles for the base trim and the caps are all the same. And then our painter kind of sat here until she got what she wanted on this. It looks exactly like the old ones.